Okay, in this video, I'm going to be upgrading the screen in this Game Gear to a McWill version 3. Everything on this Game Gear works. It's been recapped, and as you can see, the original screen is drawn 260, 270 milliamps. Okay, we'll compare this to what the McWill screen draws once we get it installed. Okay, one of the first things I do when doing an upgrade is remove the old screen. Start by removing this little piece of tape that they put to help secure the ribbon cable onto the board. Now we'll go ahead and add some flux. And we'll go ahead and use some hot air to remove it. Okay, now that the screen's removed, I'll go ahead and clean up these pins to make sure they're nice and flat before I move on. And see why I do that later on. Now it's time to remove the CFL backlight and the two fuses. So I'll go ahead and add some fresh solder to each of the joints, then remove them with my desoldering gun. Now it's time to start removing resistors from the board. Need to remove R33, R34, R32. We need to move over to R57, R56, then move down to R38, R41, and the last two are R43 and R44. Okay, the next component to remove is going to be the L2 coil. This is a through-hole component, so I have to flip the board to actually get to the legs. The next two components are these blue capacitors right up here. It's going to be C69 and C70, which are also through-hole components. The next three components are going to be transistors. It's going to be Q6, Q4, and Q3. This one's Q6, Q4, and Q3. These next components are normally the hardest for most people, being as they're so small. It's going to be R13, 14, 15, and 16. These have to be removed and replaced with 0 ohm bridges. Okay, and that completes all the prep work as far as removing components. Now it's time to test for 5 volts. So let's go ahead and connect the power board. And we're going to be testing for 5 volts on the bottom row there on the 6-pin in. On that top row is either pin 8 or 9, which are both grounds. The 6-pin on the bottom is the 5-volt rail. And as you can see, we're getting 4.97. Okay, the next step is to run a jumper from T10 to the bottom pad of R23. And somebody forgot to hit the record when he was putting the jumper in. But here's my jumper. Now all I have to do is trim off the ends. Okay, I like making as many connections as I can before I actually put the McWill in. So this is the FB1 connection. I'll go ahead and make this. This is going to be the one that runs to the clock signal on the McWill board. Okay, this connection here is going to be on C38. It's going to be on the right side of the capacitor. This is going to be for the butt 2 connection. The left side of C37 is going to be the butt 1 connection. And the last one on this is going to be the bottom half of C36, which is the butt 3 connection. Okay, this next connection goes to the second pin from the left on the top row of the cart connector. This is going to be the GGSMS connection. Then you'll go to the 6-pin on the bottom row. That is going to be the 5-volt line that we connect to. And then you go to pin 8 or pin 9 from the right on the top row for your ground connection. I'm going to make the 5-volt and ground connections later on. The next process for me is moving down to the actual pin pins on the LCD connector so I can get pins 9, 16, 18, 20, 39, and 57 marked. Always count more than once just to verify it. Now that I have all the pads marked, I can go in and actually use UV solder mask on all the pads that are not being used. This helps me eliminate the possibility of any bridging between the pins. Now on to tinning the pads. Now it's time to actually solder the wires to the pads. Yeah, sometimes this is not easy. Trying to wrangle these wires freehand while you're getting it laid down just perfectly flat on these pads can be a pain sometimes. I am using a 28 gauge silicone covered wire. And there we go. Now time to quickly tin up all the pads that I'll be using on the actual McWill board. Somebody forgot to hit record again, but these are the only two connections that I'll make on the McWill board before I put it into the actual Game Gear motherboard. Now that those connections are made, it's time to actually install this into the Game Gear motherboard. This can be tricky because it is a tight fit. Just take your time and ease it in. How you route your wires is entirely up to you. This is just how I do it. Time to finally go back and start making the connections from the McWill to the actual Game Gear. Okay, this is the 5-volt connections, and next we'll do the ground connection on the pin 8 of the top row. Alright, time to make the connections for the buttons. This one is going to be butt 3. This goes to the bottom side of capacitor C36. The next one is butt number 1, which goes to the left-hand side of C37. And the top one is the butt number 2, which goes to the right-hand side of C38. Next, we move on to the GGSMS. This was the white wire that was soldered to pin number 2 on the top row of the game cart connector. Okay, this connection is for the clock signal that comes from FB1. Now to route these wires, cut them to length and solder them into place. Okay, all done. Now all I have to do is clean up, reassemble partially to test it out. And here we are ready to test. And if you notice the current draw, we're at 380, 390 milliamps. If you remember, the original screen was only 270 to 280. So this definitely draws more current. But everything is working fine. And here it is in its new shell. And that's it for this video.